Her hand grabbed my wrist so hard it almost hurt. I turned around fast, ready to snap something, and just stopped. I didn't know this woman. Never seen her in my life. Her fingers were shaking, and her palm was cold even though it was warm out on the deck. "Please," she said, barely a whisper. "I need 1 hour. That's it." We were standing near the railing on the open deck of the ship, right as the sun started dropping into the water. Down below us, the pool bar was still playing music. People walking past in their nice clothes for the evening, headed toward the dining room. Nobody noticed us. Nobody ever notices the two people standing still while everyone else moves. "My grandmother's boat comes in 20 minutes, she said. "She thinks I'm married. She flew a long way to meet my husband tonight, and then she has to get right back on a transfer boat to make her flight home. Please, just be my husband until she leaves. I'll explain everything after. I promise." I didn't say yes right away. I want to be honest about that part because it wasn't some instant, easy thing. I stood there for a second just looking at her, at the stranger with her hand locked around my wrist, and some part of my brain was doing the math on how insane this was. But you should probably know who I was standing there before I tell you what I decided. My name's Grant Ashford, 34. I'm a structural engineer, which basically means I spend my life making sure things don't fall down. Bridges, buildings, that kind of thing. The steady work. My whole life, people have called me the reliable one, the guy you can count on. I used to think that was a compliment. 3 weeks before that woman grabbed my wrist, my fiancé sat me down at our kitchen table. Brooke, for years together. Wedding already planned, deposits already paid. She told me she was done, and she said it in this careful, almost kind voice, like she'd rehearsed it. "You're steady," she said. "You're dependable. I just don't feel alive anymore, Grant." That was it. That was the whole reason. 2 weeks later, she was seeing somebody else, somebody who apparently made her feel things I never could. I'd already paid for this cruise. It was supposed to be a pre-wedding trip, one last thing before the ceremony. Couldn't get a refund, and honestly, staying home alone in that apartment sounded worse than getting on a boat by myself. So I went. Spent the first 2 days of it eating dinner alone at a table for two, watching couples take pictures at every railing on the ship. If you've ever felt like the guy nobody actually picks, stick with me on this one. That's kind of the whole reason I tell these stories. Hit subscribe if you haven't yet, because there's more like it coming. Back to the deck. The stranger was still holding my wrist. Her eyes kept flicking past my shoulder, toward the elevators near the grand staircase. "I came here to finally tell her the truth," she said. "And I can't do it. Not tonight. Not with 20 minutes and a flight waiting on her. A smart man says no here. A careful man walks away. That's the guy Brooke traded in. Maybe that's exactly why I didn't walk." "What's my name?" I asked her. She blinked. "What? If I'm your husband, I need to know my own name and our story. She's gonna ask questions, and you've got about a minute to brief me before she gets here. Go." Something in her face broke open right then. Relief, mostly, with a shaky laugh underneath it. "Selena," she said fast. "I'm Selena. We've been married almost a year. We met at a bookstore. You knocked over a display. It's a whole story. I'll fill it in later. Use your real name. It's easier to remember under pressure." "Grant," I said. "Grant Ashford." She grabbed my left hand and looked at it and went pale. "You don't have a ring." I reached into my jacket pocket. The ring was still in there. Brooke's ring, or what would have been Brooke's ring, the one I never got around to returning because every time I picked up the phone to deal with it, I just put it back down. I slid it on. It fit. Of course it fit. "There," I said. "Married man." Selena stared at the ring, then at me, and for 1 second the panic dropped off her face completely. She looked at me like she was actually seeing a person for the first time, not just a body she'd grabbed out of desperation. The elevator chimed behind us. "That's her," Selena said, voice tight. "That's Yaya." The doors opened, and I had absolutely no idea what I was about to become for the next 20 minutes. The doors slid open and Selena changed right in front of me. Her shoulders came back. The shaking stopped. A real, warm smile spread across her face. Not fake exactly, more like something she'd trained herself to do under pressure. She grabbed my arm and pulled me forward. A small, elderly woman came out of the elevator on a steward's arm, wrapped in a soft shawl, her eyes sharp in a way that made it clear she didn't miss much. This was Yaya, Selena's grandmother. The second she spotted Selena, her whole face opened up. Selena, my girl. Selena hugged her, careful, and over her shoulder Yaya's eyes landed on me. She clapped her hands together like she'd been waiting years for this. And this is him, she said. Finally, I get to meet you. I crouched down so I was at her eye level and took her hand in both of mine. Yaya, it's really good to meet you, I said. Selena talks about you all the time, which was technically true, since Selena had been talking about her nonstop for the past 60 seconds. Yaya's eyes went wet almost instantly. She put her hand against my cheek, light, warm, papery skin, and looked at me like I was something worth having. Nobody had looked at me that way in a long time. Maybe not since before Brooke and I even got engaged. Behind Yaya stood another woman. Tall, put together, clearly not thrilled. Selena's mother, Odalise. She wasn't smiling. She was looking at me the way you'd check a support beam for a hairline crack before you trusted it with weight. Married almost a year, Odalise said slowly. And we're meeting him for the first time on a cruise ship. During a 20-minute stop. Her eyes cut to Selena. You couldn't bring him home even once? Mom, Selena started. That's on me, I said, cutting in before it went further. Calm was about the only setting I had left after the last few weeks. My work has me traveling constantly. Job sites all over. It's kept me away more than I'd like. I've wanted to meet Yaya since the day I met Selena. The second I heard she'd be coming through this port, I rearranged my whole week to be here. I looked at Odalise straight on. I know how it looks, but it was never about keeping distance from you. It was time I didn't have. I'm sorry for that. She held my eyes for a long moment. Didn't soften completely. Didn't push harder either. It felt like a door that hadn't opened, but hadn't been slammed on my fingers. Yaya, oblivious to all of it, was already tugging my sleeve. Sit, she said. 20 minutes, that's all they've given me before the boat takes me back for my flight. Sit with your Yaya. So we sat, the four of us, at a small table near the open railing, the ocean going orange behind us as the sun kept sinking. And for the stretch of time we had left, I was going to be Selena's husband, building an entire marriage out of nothing, under the sharp, watchful stare of a woman who clearly didn't trust me yet. A waiter came by with menus. Yaya waved him off. She didn't want food. She wanted stories. She wanted to know everything. Somewhere behind us, past the railing, the transfer boat was already cutting through the water on its way to pick her up. I didn't know that yet. I just knew we didn't have long. Tell me, Yaya said, leaning forward. How did you propose? I looked at Selena. She looked at me. Neither of us had planned this far ahead. You go first, I said, buying myself a second. You tell the beginning better than I do. Selena laughed. A real one, nervous but real, and launched into the bookstore story, the knocked-over display, all of it. I watched her build it in real time, watched her fill in details she was clearly making up as she went, and somehow it held together. Yaya listened with both hands pressed to her chest like she was hearing the best thing anyone had ever told her. I realized, sitting there, that I had exactly however many minutes were left to become a convincing husband to a woman I'd known for less than 10. And somehow it didn't feel as impossible as it should have. What should have been the worst 20 minutes of my life turned into something else almost right away. Yaya didn't ask the kind of questions her daughter kept aiming at me. She leaned in and asked something simpler. Does he make you laugh? She asked Selena, ignoring me for a second like I wasn't even sitting there. Selena looked at me, caught off guard, like she was actually searching for the answer instead of just performing one. Yeah, she said. Yeah, he does. It wasn't even really a lie at that point. I'd made her laugh twice already in the last few minutes, mostly out of nerves as we scrambled to keep our story straight. Yaya turned to me. Do you take care of my Selena? She thinks she has to carry everything by herself. Always. Since she was small, she's been like this. I'm learning how, I said. She's stubborn. I'm patient. Patience is basically my whole personality at this point. Yaya laughed hard enough that she had to grab the table edge. Even Odalise let a small smile slip before she caught it and pulled it back. For a few minutes it almost felt easy. Then Odalise leaned forward, casual, and asked, "Which port did you two honeymoon in?" Selena's told Yaya the story a dozen times. I've simply forgotten the name. It was a test. Clean, sharp, no safe answer because Selena and I had never invented that part. I felt her go still next to me. I smiled instead of freezing up. Honestly, I couldn't tell you the name if my life depended on it. Selena still gives me grief about it. I booked the wrong resort completely, realized it about an hour before we were supposed to check in. Spent the whole afternoon fixing it while she pretended not to notice I was falling apart. I glanced at Selena. She's never going to let me forget it. Never, Selena said, squeezing my hand hard enough to leave a mark. Odalise studied me a beat longer. Something shifted, small but real. Not trust. More like one careful person recognizing another. At least you admit your mistakes, she said. Most men your age don't. She sat back. Not approval, but a truce, and that was enough for what time we had left. With maybe 5 minutes before the transfer boat, Yaya did something that flipped the whole evening over. She reached into her shawl and pulled out a thin gold chain with a small sapphire pendant on it, the metal worn smooth in places from being handled for decades. She pressed it into Selena's hand, eyes suddenly wet. "This was mine," she said. "The day I married your grandfather 60 years ago, I wore this. I carried it across the ocean because I wanted to give it to you myself. Not mail it. I wanted to see with my own eyes that you're settled and loved before." She stopped herself there. Didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "Now I can rest easy," she said instead, folding Selena's fingers shut around it. "My Selena is loved." I watched the whole weight of what we'd built land on Selena's face all at once. Her mouth opened slightly, and I could see the exact second she decided to tell the truth. Right there, 5 minutes before her grandmother had to leave. Couldn't let her do that. Not to herself. Not to the old woman in front of us with tears running down her face. I put my hand over both of theirs, still joined around the pendant. "Yaya," I said, "that might be the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given her. We'll take care of it. I promise." I meant that part more than I had any right to, considering none of it was real yet. Over the speakers, an announcement crackled. Final call for the shore transfer. Our time was up, and none of us at that table were ready for it. The announcement repeated itself, and Yaya's steward started wheeling her chair toward the gangway before any of us had really said goodbye. She reached up and grabbed my face one more time. "You're a good one," she said. "I knew it the second you stepped off that elevator with her. Take care of my girl." Then she was gone, wheeled toward the exit, Odalise following behind, but not before turning back for one last look at me over her shoulder. I couldn't tell if it was suspicion or something else starting underneath it. Selena and I stood at the railing and watched the transfer boat pull away, cutting a white line through the darkening water toward the port lights. The second they were out of sight, she started shaking. "I have to call them back," she said. "I have to tell her the truth before her flight leaves. Grant, I just let my grandmother put her wedding pendant on me for a marriage that isn't real." "What did I just do?" "You didn't steal anything from her," I said. "You gave an old woman one of the best 20 minutes she's had in years. That's not a crime." She turned to face me, eyes red. "It's a lie. It's a kindness wearing a lie's clothes," I said. "I've had 3 weeks of nothing but the truth, and let me tell you, the truth isn't always better. The truth is my fiancé left me because I wasn't exciting enough to keep around. That's been the worst stretch of my life. Then a stranger grabbed my wrist tonight and asked me to be her husband for 20 minutes. And somehow it turned into the best 20 minutes I've had in longer than I can remember." Selena stared at me. "Your fiancé left you 3 weeks ago. For someone more exciting," I said. "I build bridges for a living." It was always going to be a short list of reasons. She laughed, and it came out tangled up with crying, both at once. "You're the least boring man I've ever met. You just pretended to be a stranger's husband to protect an old woman's feelings. Who does that? A guy with nothing left to lose, I said, taking the only risk he's got. We stood there a while, the ship's engines humming under our feet, other passengers walking past laughing, taking pictures of the sunset, no idea what had just happened 3 feet away from them. Before we split off to our own cabins that night, we swapped numbers. Officially, it was to sort out getting the pendant back to Yaya somehow. It was never just the pendant. She called that night, worried sick, going over every second of the dinner out loud. I picked up, and we ended up on the phone until almost 2 in the morning. She called again the next night, still stuck on Yaya, still stuck on the pendant sitting around her neck like a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. By the third night, neither of us was really talking about the pendant anymore, and neither of us said that part out loud yet either. The rest of the cruise went differently than it started. I'd gotten on that ship alone, dreading every dinner. Now I found myself checking the time before breakfast, hoping I'd run into her by the pool or on the deck where the whole thing started. We didn't put a name on anything during those last few days on the ship. Didn't need to yet. But something had shifted, and both of us felt it even if neither of us said it. When the ship docked back home, we stood on the pier together, neither one in a rush to say goodbye, even though technically nothing between us had officially started. The excuse to keep calling each other just quietly disappeared, and neither of us tried to bring it back. Turned out Selena lived about an hour from me, close enough that within a month I was driving out to see her, away from any ship schedule, any countdown. We sat across from each other at a small place near her apartment, and for the first time we talked without watching a clock. That's when I found out why she'd been telling her grandmother she was married for almost 2 years before that night on the ship. She'd spent most of her adult life as her family's biggest worry, still single while her cousins had all settled down young. Every holiday came with another round of her mother introducing her to somebody suitable. She'd stopped bringing anyone real home because every relationship instantly turned into a family meeting. Yaya was different. Yaya had raised her through the hardest stretch of her life, and Yaya's one wish left was simple: see Selena settled before her health made trips like this one impossible. So 2 years back, Selena told a small lie to ease that worry. Said she'd met someone. The lie grew. A boyfriend, then a quiet wedding she called small and private, until it turned into a full marriage her grandmother had flown across an ocean to witness in person. You lied to her for 2 years, I said, so she'd stop worrying you were alone. I know how it sounds, she said, quiet. It sounds like the most love I've ever heard of somebody putting into a lie, I said. You'd rather carry that weight yourself than let her spend one more night scared for you. I looked at her. Your family thinks you're some kind of disappointment because you're not married. They've got it backwards. You're the only one at that table who loves somebody enough to build a whole story just to protect their heart. She went quiet, turning her glass slowly on the table. My fake husband's somehow better at this than every real one I've dated, she said finally. Guess I've had a lot of practice this month figuring out what actually matters. We kept meeting after that. Slow, careful, both of us in our own ways. About 2 months in, she took me to a small harbor near where the cruise had left from, the same water, if not the exact spot. We stood at the railing, watching another ship pull out toward the horizon, and she turned to face me. Can I ask you something? She said. And don't give me the calm, careful engineer answer. I'll try. It's kind of my only setting. Are we doing this because it's real? She said. Or because we got tangled in a lie and we're both too kind to walk away from it now? I've spent my whole life being everyone's obligation. The daughter they have to marry off. I can't be your obligation too. I'd rather be nothing to you than something you feel stuck taking care of. I thought about giving her the careful answer. Then I didn't. 3 weeks before you grabbed my wrist, I said. A woman I loved for 4 years told me I was too safe to keep around. So I know exactly what you're asking, and exactly what it costs to ask it. I took her hand. You're not an obligation, Selena. You're the first thing in my whole careful life I've wanted without being able to explain it. I didn't plan for you. That's how I know it's real. I don't want to fix you. I just want to keep being surprised by you. She kissed me right there at the railing. The same water, different night, The realest thing either of us had found in a long time. Neither of us was on the rebound, and neither of us was being reckless. We both knew exactly what it costs to reach for the wrong thing at the wrong moment. So we went slow, and we built something real on top of the strangest foundation two people ever started with. 5 months after that night on the ship, Selena and I flew out together, on purpose this time, to see Yaya and end the lie for good. We sat in her small, sunny living room, and Selena took the pendant off from around her neck and set it in her grandmother's lap. Then she told her everything. The 2 years of lies, the panic on the deck, the stranger she'd grabbed out of pure desperation. All of it, bracing for her grandmother's heart to break. Yaya listened without saying a word. When Selena finished, wrecked and waiting for the worst, Yaya started laughing. "Beta," she said, wiping her eyes, cupping Selena's face in her hands. "You think I didn't know?" Selena went still. "I'm old," Yaya said. "Not foolish. I've seen real marriages and I've seen frightened girls pretending. Your husband didn't know which port you honeymooned in. A real husband knows that without blinking. I knew Selena, within 10 minutes at that table." She picked the pendant back up. "But I watched him, this stranger you grabbed out of a crowd. I watched how he treated an old woman he'd never met, how he covered for you without hesitating, how he looked at you when you laughed. And do you know what I saw?" Her voice broke slightly. "I saw a man who treated my granddaughter better in 20 minutes of pretending than any real man your mother pushed toward you ever did in years. So I gave him that pendant. Not because I believed the marriage. Because I believed him." She pressed it back into Selena's hands, then reached over and folded my hand in with theirs. "I don't have time left to wait around for paperwork," she said. "I know what I saw. Now stop wasting time, and go make an old woman's lie come true, before I actually run out of time to see it." 6 weeks later, I booked another cruise, same port Selena had grabbed my wrist in the first time. I didn't tell her why. We stood at the railing that evening as the sun went down, the sky turning that same orange and pink it had that first night. Selena was laughing about something small. No idea what I had in my jacket pocket. I got down on one knee right there on the deck. This time there was no borrowed ring left over from someone else. I picked this one out myself. "Selena," I said, "I didn't plan on any of this when I got on this ship alone. I thought being the safe, steady one meant I'd always be the guy left behind. Then you grabbed my wrist, and everything about how I saw myself started changing. I don't want to pretend anymore. I want this real, every day, for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me?" She said yes before I even finished asking, hands shaking again. Except this time it wasn't panic. Yaya was at the real wedding a year later, front row, wearing that same pendant one more time before finally passing it down to Selena for good. Odalise walked her mother down the aisle, and by then she'd long since stopped looking at me like a bridge that might crack. I think about that first night a lot. The week I felt like the guy nobody wanted, the safe bet traded in for somebody more exciting. A stranger grabbed my wrist out of desperation, and in 20 minutes, an old woman looked at me and saw a husband worth choosing. Turns out the people who call you too safe, too steady, too boring, they're not seeing you clearly. They're just distracted by motion. It took one stranger, one sharp-eyed grandmother, and 20 minutes to show me what being chosen actually feels like.